Thousands have rallied across Europe against the International Anti-Piracy Accord, known as ACTA. People in the UK, Germany, Poland and Lithuania have voiced their fear that the treaty would harm freedom of speech and lead to online censorship. RT's Laura Smith has more now from London.
In line with hundreds of thousands of people all over Europe today, these people here in London behind me are demonstrating against ACTA, the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Agreement. It's an agreement which would make internet service providers essentially responsible if their users are pirating data. So they'd have to police users' activity, which would lead to a lot more monitoring of the internet. There are lots of people behind me wearing these anonymous masks that the anonymous hackers group often wear. They've got banners reading "Don't shut down the internet." They're saying no ACTA, culture is made of copies, and stop internet censorship. And one of the main objections to the ACTA agreement is that it's been negotiated almost entirely in secret, so much so that the main EU negotiator resigned in a storm recently, saying that the document was secretive and undemocratic.
So it's been negotiated in secret by people who, have not let civil society in. They haven't allowed us to comment and say, this will affect our civil liberties, this will reduce freedom of speech, this will stop us from being able to comment and hold people to account. And the result is a treaty that's incredibly dangerous.
One of the main complaints about this document is its unclear wording, that it would be easy to make unintentional copyright infringers criminally liable, and also criminalises what used to be a civil offence. So that means we'd see a lot more cases potentially, like the one of a Minnesotan woman who shared 24 songs on the internet and found herself liable for $1.5 million worth of damages, essentially $62,500 for each song that she had shared.
The threat is to bloggers, it's the threat to site owners, it's the threat to internet service providers. Your experience of YouTube, of Facebook, of Flickr could become very different, but it's also that even innocently connecting to copyrighted material could actually land you in criminal sanctions.
This is not just about the internet either. It would also apply to clothes, electronics and also to medicine, which would make it more difficult for poor countries to buy generic, untrademarked, cheaper drugs, making it more expensive for poorer countries to keep their people healthy. Basically what these people are saying is that the decisions that have been made behind closed doors will fundamentally affect the economies, the privacy and the civil liberties of ordinary, everyday people. And the fact that it's been done in secret means that they can only assume that this isn't in their best interests.
And now let's cross live to London to discuss the protest with Peter Bradwell. He's a campaigner for the Open Rights Group. ACTA states that all procedures shall be implemented in a manner that preserves freedom of expression, fair process and privacy. So what are the protesters worried about? You were protesting there today, weren't you?
That's right. I think what we and the protesters today all around Europe are concerned about is that there are some fine words about respecting fundamental principles, but in practice, the very broad wording of the agreement does create some real concerns about how we're effectively handing control and power over what happens online far too easily to private interests. And that will have inevitable consequences for freedom of expression, for people's privacy, for innovation and many other of the benefits we enjoy from the internet.
But could you explain why would cracking down on piracy result in censorship?
I don't think inherently cracking down on piracy does. It's when it's done through mechanisms and treaties that are overly broad and give too much power that's too unchecked to private interests. If you give businesses the power to have content taken down, to have users effectively surveilled by their internet service providers, then you're creating a system there that can be abused and where mistakes can happen. And that's why it's such a dangerous agreement.
But do you accept that there is a need to protect intellectual property, artists, producers, manufacturers and service providers? They do need some sort of legislation, don't they, when we read about the increasing levels of piracy?
I think one of the things that the protests in the US over things like SOPA and now in Europe over ACTA have shown is that there's a huge congregation and coalition of voices who want to be part of the discussions about what proportionate and effective enforcement measures look like. So far, treaties like ACTA have been negotiated in secret, which is why they're so unbalanced. And if we really want copyright enforcement and IP enforcement that works, policymakers are going to have to start listening to a broader set of voices.
And not for agreements to be made behind closed doors, which is clearly one of your main issues here.
That's absolutely right. I mean, one of the key problems with ACTA is that it's been negotiated in secret, and that realization has, coupled with the momentum from the protests in the US, has really seen people raising their voice and saying, look, ACTA is really an unacceptable insult to democracy, as much as it has really substantive problems as well.
If someone does breach the agreement as it stands, what would be the penalties?
Well, there's some really odd wording around the civil damages that are available and how the damages are calculated, which could be way too high potentially. And there's concerns about whether that's based on any kind of robust evidence or not. There's other concerns around the wording of the criminal sections and the definition of what counts as commercial scale, which seems way too broad and would potentially catch far too many kinds of websites. So the real danger is that we're effectively criminalising the wrong people here, and unintentionally or intentionally, we're going to be harming freedom of expression rather than trying to stop seriously damaging counterfeiting or piracy.
And there really is a danger of innocent people facing massive fines or indeed imprisonment.
Absolutely. If you don't make the wording of these things tight, if you don't clearly define the kind of behaviour and activity that you're targeting, then inevitably the wrong people are going to be caught up in this, and that's going to be hugely damaging to the way that the internet works. And as the internet becomes so important to political expression, that's a real concern.
Well, it's really interesting to hear your thoughts here, Peter. Thank you very much indeed for joining us live there from London. Peter Bradwell from the Open Rights Group in London.